Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in our presentation about stats and engagement in 3-minute thesis presentations. I'm Xuyan from the Open University of Hong Kong, and this presentation is based on a paper that I co-author with Professor Kevin Jiang from Jilin University in China, and the paper has been published in the Journal of English for Academic Purposes. In today's presentation, I'm going to talk about the background of the study, that I may share how we compile a small-scale corpus of 3 empty presentations and what we found from the analysis of those corpora. When I was a PhD student, I participated in 3-minute thesis presentation. When I was preparing for that presentation, I invited my heterogeneous friends and I shared my research work every single day. So I tortured them a lot, and I felt sorry about them. I benefited from this kind of experience because from communicating the disciplinary knowledge with my heterogeneous friends, I realized that scientific communication skill is very important for not only a research postgraduate student, but also for a researcher. Because when we are doing our research, we're not only going to communicate our research findings to the people in academia by publishing papers or doing conference presentation, but also disseminating our research work, our research output to those beneficiaries beyond academia. How we can communicate this scientific knowledge to the audience with different kinds of disciplinary background may be something that we need to learn about. Because when we try to write up some research grant proposal, we also need to fill in a section about how we're going to communicate our research knowledge with the audience beyond academic world. So this would be something that we need to learn about. That would be some kind of lifelong education. So this kind of experience may show us that scientific communication is very important, like what I just mentioned, because we may make use of this kind of competence in different opportunities or under different kinds of situations in the society to communicate our research work to different kinds of people. So developing students' awareness and competence in presenting their academic work is very important. 3 empty presentations or 3-minute thesis competition is one kind of activities that can cultivate students' academic, presentation, and research communication skills, because the research postgraduate students need to present their research in 3 minutes with only one PowerPoint slide in a language appropriate to a non-specialist audience. And their performance are usually evaluated from 2 general aspects. One is about comprehension and content. The other is about engagement and communication. 3 empty presentations arouse our curiosity because of their discursive hybridity. So somehow we can consider them as one kind of oral academic genre, which attends to listeners' processing needs in a real-time speech event and seeks interpersonal rapport and collegiality. But the audience of 3 empty presentations may have different kinds of disciplinary or knowledge backgrounds. So when we are trying to communicate our research knowledge to them, we may be doing something like popularization of science. And 3 empty by nature is a kind of competition. So the presentations could be carefully scripted and well rehearsed for peak performance to impress the judges. And this kind of unique features of 3 empty presentations arouse our curiosity to take a look at how the presenters communicate their disciplinary knowledge to a wide range of audience. And more specifically in this study, we're going to take a look at how the presenters project their stance or their propositions and how they engage the listeners or the audience into their presentation. And this kind of explorations is based on the model of interactional markers proposed by Professor Kent Hyland. In this model, stands can be interpreted from 4 kinds of markers: hedges, boosters, attitude markers, and self-mentions. So hedges and boosters are 2 sides of one coin, because when we try to use the hedges, we're actually showing our reservations towards our claims, or we're trying to create some kind of space for alternative views or show our prideness. But when we're using boosters, we are showing our confidence and assertiveness of our propositions. If we would like to project our effective attitudes towards the propositions, we may use the attitude markers, and self-mentions can be used to project the speaker's overt visibility to their contributions. Engagement markers can be categorized into 4 different types. Listener mention, like you, are used to bring the listeners into the ongoing speech, while directives may be related to some kind of instructions to the listener, and we have questions, and we have appeals to share knowledge, which are some signals asking listeners to recognize something as familiar or accepted. If we take a further look at the literature of 3-minute thesis, we may say that, 3 empty presentations have been seldom investigated in the current literature, but still we could find some studies which have really inspiring research findings, like about the rhetorical structure, about the recontextualization strategies. And Professor Hyland and Zhou find that the social science presenters use stats markers less frequently than the hard science presenters, which is quite different from what we learned from in terms of the research writing discourse. So these kind of findings inspire us to conduct our study, and we compile a small-scale corpus of 83 empty presentations by finalists of the competition in a university in Hong Kong during the year of 2012 and 2019. And based on the faculties of the presenters, we categorize those presentations into 6 main disciplines. So we have 3 hard science disciplines, like science, engineering, and medicine. And we have 3 soft science disciplines, including arts, education, and social science. We use the tag N and con, and we refer to the interactional markers proposed by Professor Hyland and make some adjustment based on the natures of spoken discourse. And we also manually check the accuracy of the entries. Then here are what we found. In terms of stats markers, on average, there were around 50 cases per 1,000 words in 3 empty presentations. And self-mentions are the most frequent markers in 3 empty presentations, followed by attitude markers, hedges, and boosters. So this is quite different from what we learned from in research writing, right? If we take a further look at the use of self-mentions in context, we find that self-mentions were used to help to present student speakers as real, approachable people with concerns that many in the audience will be able to identify with, creating a personal dialogue. Like in example 1, the medicine student said, "This is a question I addressed in my PhD study." And I find 6 dominant ion channels exist in the cells. Attitude markers are the second frequent stats markers in 3 empty presentations. And we find that the presenters used a lot of importance markers and surprising markers when they tried to highlight the importance of their research ideas, or the importance of their methodology design, or the importance of their research findings, or the applications of the studies. And they also use the surprising markers when they try to highlight some findings were beyond our expectations. So generally speaking, attitude markers are used to create strong interpersonal ties, and thus they transform knowledge dissemination into an entertaining event that makes science accessible and acceptable to general audiences. Like in example 2, the medicine student said, "The stem cells are amazing because they have the most fantastic ability to repair damaged cells. Hedges and boosters are not that frequent in 3MT presentations. So this is quite different from what we learn about in research writing. And hedges were used because the presenters intended to distinguish the fact from their opinions or to present the claims with caution. And one additional observation is that the presenters were not quite sure about the background of the listeners, of the audience. So this kind of nature or this kind of feature may reduce their confidence in how much their propositions could be widely accepted. So they tended to use more hedges than boosters, like in example 3. The social science student said, cooperative marriage may be a queer pathway to something gay people long for. It may be a way out or maybe a way to walk past. In terms of the disciplinary differences, we find that significant differences existed between the hard science students and soft science students in terms of stats markers. And the hard science students make more use of stats markers in 3MT presentations than the soft science students because they use more self-mentions and attitude markers. So here are some of our explanations. Professor Hyland and Professor Jiang did a study some time ago to investigate how the scientists projected their authorial stance in research article from a historical perspective, and they find that scientists now display more authorial intrusion and a more visible stance than in the past. So this may try to help to explain our findings. And second, the hard science students may formulate the presentations of abstract subjects in a more colloquial manner, and they may strike a chord with the audience and add persuasive force of knowledge claims. This may help to explain our findings. Then what about engagement markers? On average, there are around 36.9 cases of engagement markers per 1,000 works, which is lower than the use of the stats markers in 3MT presentations. And here is our observation. The less assured composition of audience may reduce the presenter's confidence in frequently engaging them, obviously, in the 3MT presentations. So they tended not to use that many engagement markers. The most frequent type of engagement markers is listener mention, followed by question, directives, and appeals to knowledge. In terms of listener mentions, there are different patterns, like in these two examples. In example 4, the social science student said, that's why we have this left side bias for faces. Similarly, for Chinese characters, no matter whether we can write enough, we also have this left side bias for Chinese characters, just like faces. So here, we are used to display a sense of shared understanding and rapport between the presenter and also the audience. Then we may move on to example 5 from the medicine student. It functions as an cushion to support your weight and allow flexibility for your bending. So even if you're so unlucky to have the pain, don't worry, we have the solution. Here, the listeners are treated as someone much like the presenter who are able to perceive the usefulness of research output and thus create some kind of emotional proximity. There are also some other patterns, like at the beginning of the presentations, the presenters may use you to establish a common ground with the audience, or they may appeal to their daily experience. And sometimes they address the audience as an everyman researcher. And sometimes at the end of their presentations, they recommend some actions to take. So they use cues to urge the audience to take up some actions. And appeals to knowledge were used the less frequently among the 4 types of engagement markers. Our observation is that the students or the presenters are not quite sure about the background of the audience, that they may not know how they can make use of those appeals to knowledge markers to highlight the shared knowledge or the shared understanding between the presenter themselves and also the audience. So this kind of markers were not that frequent in 3MT presentations. In terms of disciplinary differences, we did not find any significant differences in engagement markers between the hard science and soft science groups. But if we take a further look at the different types of engagement markers, we may still find that the soft science students tended to use more questions in 3MT presentations, while the hard science students tended to use more directives in their 3MT presentations. And in terms of directives related to the instructions, if you take a look at the literature about research writing, you may find that the hard science students tended to use more physical acts to invite their audience or readers to take up some actions, while those from soft science disciplines tended to use more cognitive or textual directives to ask their audience to think about something or to refer to something. But here, we find that the engineering students use more cognitive and textual directives than physical acts directives, while those from social science discipline use more physical acts directives in their 3MT presentation. And our observation is that the engineering students focus on the social applications of the research finding. So they would like to urge the audience to think about the applications or the implication of their research findings by using those cognitive or textual directives. While for those social science students, at the end of their presentations, they tended to recommend some actions for their audience to take. So they use more physical acts directives over there. Now, questions are used to lead audience to their point of view and seek for a front-loaded experiential sympathy at the outset. Like in example 6, the education student said, vocabulary is especially important for young children. Why? Because when they can't even master the most basic words, how can they move on to learn more advanced language skills? Then she talked about the purpose and also the design of her study. So these are something we found from the analysis of the corpora. I would like to give you a summary of the findings. Mainly, there are 3 points. First, 3MT presentations obtain a highly frequent use of first and second person pronouns. So this finding is different from what we found in research writing in the current literature. Second, 3MT presenters exploit stance expressions more often than engagement devices. This is different from what we found in the current literature about peer seminars and conference presentations. Lastly, hard science make more use of stance expressions, especially attitude markers, than soft sciences. This is a bit unusual compared with what we found in research writing in the current literature. Then what we can learn from these research findings? The main point would be like 3MT presentations could be a very special and unique genre, which worth our further exploration. Because it could be similar as research writing, like research articles or seminars or conference presentations, but it is quite different from us somehow to some extent. Okay, so it would be very interesting if we could take a further look at the 3MT presentation genre and to explore what kind of strategies, what kind of devices or techniques the presenters use in order to communicate their disciplinary knowledge to the general audience. And as an EAP teacher, so I'm also teaching the university students English in the classroom. What I learned from this research finding is that maybe we need to teach our students how to communicate their disciplinary knowledge to different kinds of audience, because if they could learn about the skills of scientific communication, they may be better prepared for their future career. So this would be something we would like to share with you in this presentation. And this is the reference. And if you have any suggestions or advice regarding this study or 3MT presentation, you're more than welcome to contact us. Thank you very much for your attention.